All right, everyone, welcome in. It's, let's see, Monday, April 7th, 2025. And, well, yesterday brought some news that, well, I think we all knew this shoe was going to drop eventually, right? It's going to
Right.
affect how much we're shelling out for, well, pretty basic stuff, what we cook with and what we use to get around.
Yeah, no kidding. It was like a double whammy announcement yesterday. First, they're hiking up the price of LPG cylinders, that's the cooking gas, by a whole 50 rupees. And then, bam, they tack on an extra 2 rupees per liter in excise duty for both petrol and diesel.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I always feel a little lost when they start throwing around these numbers. What does it actually mean for, when I'm at the store or filling up my tank?
Exactly, exactly. And that's why we're here, right? We're going to unpack all of this, try to make sense of it, and figure out what's really going on. So by the end of this deep dive, you'll know exactly how these changes are going to hit your wallet and, more importantly, why they're happening in the first place. No more head scratching. We're going to get to the bottom of it all. So let's just jump right in. First up, that LPG price hike.
Okay, so here's the deal. Starting tomorrow, April 8th, if you're in Delhi and you need to get your standard LPG cylinder refilled, it's going to set you back 853 rupees. That's a straight up 50 rupee increase from the previous price of 803. And for folks who are part of the Ujjwala scheme, that's the government program to provide LPG connections to lower income households, they're seeing the same 50 rupee jump, going from 503 to 553 rupees. So, yeah, everyone's feeling the pinch.
You know, it's funny. I was just thinking about how last year, March 2024, we actually had some good news on this front. LPG prices went down by 100 rupees. Felt like a little breathing room, maybe even a chance to treat yourself to something nice. And now, boom, here we are barely a year later, and we're right back to climbing prices. So what gives? What happened in the meantime?
Well, it definitely makes this increase feel more, well, jarring, right? Especially coming after that brief period of lower prices. Now, the official word, straight from Oil Minister Hardeep Singh Puri, is that this hike was, quote, long overdue because of, how things are in the global energy market. But of course, that's pretty vague. What exactly is happening globally that's pushing these prices up?
That's the million-dollar question. But before we get too deep into all the international stuff, I think it's important to understand what this 50 rupee hike actually means for people on a day-to-day basis. I saw some numbers that broke it down daily, and I thought that was really helpful. So for a family in Delhi that's part of the Ujjwala scheme, we're talking about an extra like 6 rupees and 10 pays every day. For everyone else, it's closer to 14 rupees and 58 pays per day, assuming, of course, that a cylinder lasts you about a month.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I mean, sure, those amounts might not seem like much on their own, but think about it. That's every single day. Over the course of a month, those small increases add up. And when you factor in all the other things we're spending money on, groceries, transportation, those little treats we like to enjoy, it all starts to, put a strain on the budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there was another detail that kind of caught my attention, the whole monthly review thing.
Hmm.
So they're saying that they'll be reassessing these prices every month. What does that tell us about what we can expect going forward? Sounds like things are still pretty up in the air.
Yeah, exactly. It signals that, things are kind of volatile, that they're keeping a close eye on those global factors we were talking about. So yeah, further price adjustments, whether they go up again or hopefully come down a bit, are definitely still on the table. It's hard to predict what's going to happen next. Now, let's switch gears and talk about the petrol and diesel situation.
Okay, so this one was a bit of a head scratcher for me when I first heard about it. So they're increasing the excise duty, that's the tax on both petrol and diesel, by 2 rupees per liter. And this change also takes effect tomorrow. So to be specific, the special additional excise duty on petrol is going from 11 to 13 rupees, and for diesel, it's going from 8 to 10 rupees. So naturally, I thought, okay, this means we're all going to be paying more at the pump.
Yeah, that's usually how it works. When they increase the excise duty, the price at the pump goes up. And when you add up all the different taxes on fuel, the basic excise duty, the agriculture infrastructure and development cess, the road and infrastructure cess, it's quite a lot. Right now, the total tax on a liter of petrol in Delhi is 21 rupees and 90 paise. And for diesel, it's 17 rupees and 80 paise. So yeah, on paper, it definitely looks like we're going to be paying more.
But here's the thing that really threw me off. They're saying that even with this tax hike, the retail prices in Delhi will stay the same. Petrol will still be 94 rupees and 77 paise per liter, and diesel will stay at 87 rupees and 67 paise. I'm like, how is that even possible? What's the trick here?
It's all about timing and taking advantage of what's happening in the global crude oil market. You see, over the past few weeks, international crude oil prices have actually been dropping pretty significantly. So the oil companies, the ones that actually sell us petrol and diesel, were already in a position where they could have lowered prices. even without this excise duty change.
Ah, okay, I see where you're going with this. So instead of us seeing that price drop at the pump, the government is essentially using that potential saving to cover this 2 rupee excise hike. It's like when you go to the store and they're having a sale, but then you realize they've also raised the price of something else. You might end up paying the same amount overall, but the way they got there is a little, well, sneaky.
That's a good analogy. Think of it this way. Let's say your local supermarket was planning to put milk on sale next week. But then the government comes along and imposes a new tax on milk. The supermarket has a choice. They can either pass that tax on to you, the customer, by raising the price of milk, or they can just absorb the tax themselves, using the money they would have saved from the sale to cover the extra cost. You, the customer, don't see any change in the price of milk, but behind the scenes, the economics have shifted.
Right, so we're not feeling the pinch at the pump right now. But it's not because fuel hasn't gotten more expensive. It's because of this lucky break with international oil prices, which is giving the oil companies a bit of a cushion to absorb the extra tax burden. So now let's dig into the why. Why is the price of LPG going up? And why are they handling the petrol and diesel situation this way? What's the bigger picture here?
Well, a key factor is that India relies heavily on imports for a lot of its energy needs. We import around 60% of our LPG and an even bigger chunk, about 85% of our crude oil. So basically, we're at the mercy of the global market. When prices go up internationally, our prices tend to follow suit.
Makes sense. We're not producing enough oil and gas domestically, so we have to buy it from other countries, and that means we have to play by their rules.
Exactly. Now, let's focus on LPG for a second. There's this benchmark called the Saudi CP that stands for contract price, which is a major factor in determining LPG prices worldwide. And what we've seen over the past year and a half is a huge surge in this benchmark price. Back in July 2023, it was around $385 per ton. But by February of this year, 2025, it has shot up to $629 per ton. That's a whopping 63% increase.
Wow, it's a massive jump. No wonder there's pressure to raise prices here at home. If the raw material itself is costing so much more on the global market, it's bound to have a ripple effect.
Absolutely. In fact, some calculations show that if the domestic LPG price in Delhi had fully reflected that global price increase, a cylinder could be costing as much as 1,028 rupees and 50 paise right now. That's way more than what we're currently paying, even with this recent hike.
So it sounds like the oil companies have been taking a hit for quite a while now, keeping prices artificially low to protect consumers.
You got it. Public sector oil companies like Indian Oil Corporation, BPCL, and HPCL have basically been selling LPG at a loss just to make sure people can still afford to cook. The oil minister said that these companies lost a combined total of over 41,000 crore rupees in the last fiscal year, which ended on March 31st. That's a huge amount of money.
So this 50 rupee hike is probably an attempt to start making up for some of those losses and maybe to strengthen their case for a bailout from the government.
Exactly. It's about getting closer to breaking even if they're not fully recovering their costs just yet. And this brings us back to the petrol and diesel situation. India consumes a huge amount of petrol and diesel. We're talking about 16,000 crore liters every year. So a 2 rupee increase per liter can generate a lot of extra revenue for the government. We're talking about an estimated 32,000 crore rupees annually.
Which, if I'm doing the math correctly, is pretty close to the amount those oil companies have been losing on LPG. So it seems like the government might be using this extra money from petrol and diesel to, in a way, subsidize the cost of cooking gas. It's a delicate balancing act, isn't it? Trying to keep everyone happy.
Definitely. They're juggling the financial health of the oil companies, the government's own budget, and of course the impact on consumers. Now let's zoom out a bit and look at the global oil market because that plays a big role in all of this.
Yeah, because that seems to be the main reason why we're not seeing those higher excise duties reflected in petrol and diesel prices at the pump, right?
Exactly. As of yesterday, April 7th, international oil prices took a pretty significant dip. Brent crude dropped to $63.15 per barrel, and U.S. West Texas Intermediate fell even further to $59.57. These are the lowest prices we've seen since April 2021. And the main drivers behind this decline are those ongoing trade tensions between some of the world's biggest economies, like the U.S. and China. There's a lot of worry that this could lead to a global recession, which would mean less demand for oil, and that's putting downward pressure on prices.
So theoretically, this should be good news for a country like India, which imports most of its oil. Cheaper oil should mean cheaper petrol and diesel for us, right?
You would think so. It's the potential upside to all of this. The oil companies were probably already planning to lower prices because of this cheaper crude oil, and Oil Minister Puri even hinted that if these lower prices somewhere between $60 and $65 per barrel, maybe even up to 68, hold steady for a while, we might actually see some price cuts at the pump in the future.
But for now, that potential saving is being used to cover the higher excise duty, so we're not actually getting the full benefit of those lower global prices just yet.
That's the reality of the situation. The government has decided to prioritize offsetting those LPG losses and increasing its own revenue through this excise duty hike. They're basically taking advantage of the wiggle room created by those lower oil prices. And it's not the first time they've done something like this. There's a whole history of governments using this kind of strategy.
The information we have actually touched on that, pointing out how this government has a bit of a track record when it comes to adjusting excise duties in response to changes in global oil prices.
Right. Back when oil prices were really low between 2014 and 2016, they actually increased the excise duty on petrol and diesel 9 times. And that resulted in a huge increase in their tax revenue. We're talking about a doubling of excise collections from about 99,000 crore rupees in the 2014-15 fiscal year to over 2,042,000 crore rupees in 2016-17.
So there's definitely a precedent for this. They've used those periods of low global prices to boost their own coffers without causing too much pain at the pump, at least in the short term.
Exactly. And they've also been known to reverse some of those increases, especially when oil prices spike or, maybe when elections are around the corner. We saw excise duty cuts in 2017, 2018, and then again last year, right before the elections. It's all about finding that sweet spot, balancing their need for money with public perception and the impact on people's wallets. And this current excise duty hike, which is kind of hidden by those lower global oil prices, seems to be another example of that.
It does seem that way. So just to sum up, the price of LPG is going up, and that's going to affect how much we spend on cooking. As for petrol and diesel, the government has raised taxes, but we're not seeing that reflected in the price at the pump yet, at least not in Delhi, because of those lower global oil prices.
That's a good summary. But as always, the future is uncertain. LPG prices will be reviewed every month, so they could go up or down depending on what happens in the global market. And while petrol and diesel prices are stable for now, that stability is very much tied to those low global prices and the government's financial strategies.
Which brings me to a final thought for everyone listening. With those global oil prices trending downwards, it really makes you wonder what's going to happen next. If those prices stay low, how will that affect the government's budget, the profits of the oil companies, and most importantly, the prices we pay for fuel and cooking gas? It's a complicated web, and it goes way beyond just these immediate price changes. Maybe, just maybe, if those low oil prices stick around, we might actually see some real relief for consumers in the long run. It's definitely something to watch closely.
Absolutely. It's a situation that deserves our attention. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
And we'll be back soon to break down more news and events that matter to you. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and as always, thanks for listening.